That's a direct quote from a journalist on the ground in Nigeria. It's chilling. And that one sentence, it just throws you right into the horror of an event that's part of a much, much bigger story. So today, we're going to try to untangle what's happening in Nigeria, specifically the violence affecting Christians. Now, this is a story you might think you already know, but trust me, it is way more complicated than it seems. There are conflicting stories, different explanations, and the human cost is just staggering. To really get what's at stake here, we have to go beyond the big headlines. We need to ground this in a real human story. So we're going to start with a horrific event known as the Yelwada Massacre. Okay, so picture this. It's a rainy night in a town called Yelwada. There are more than 500 Christians, many of them women and children, huddled together. And these folks weren't just in their homes. No, they'd already been forced to run from other attacks. They were refugees in their own country, just hoping they'd finally found a safe place. So earlier that day, some reports start coming in about terrorist activity in a nearby area. The local vigilantes, the town's few police officers, they all rush out to respond. But it wasn't real. It was a setup, a calculated trick to draw away any protection and leave the town completely vulnerable. And with the town's defenders gone, the militants descended. Now, when we say Islamist, it's important to be clear. We're talking about a political ideology, not the religion of Islam as a whole. For 3 straight hours, they unleashed hell. More than 200 people were murdered. It was just a brutal, horrifyingly planned attack, and it really shows you the devastating human toll of this conflict. That one story is it's gut-wrenching. But now, we need to zoom out, because to really understand what's happening, you have to see the scale of it all. And the numbers, well, they're shocking. Just take a second and let this number sink in. This is from the NGO Open Doors. In 2023, of all the Christians killed around the entire world, specifically because of their faith, 82% of them were in Nigeria. I mean, it's not just a problem there. It has become the global epicenter for this kind of targeted violence. And this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long, long time. Look at this next figure. Since just 2009, over 50,000 Christians have been killed. That number, it speaks to a sustained, brutal conflict that's been raging for well over a decade. And it's not just the lives that have been lost. The violence has sparked a massive humanitarian crisis. Think about it. 5 million Christians have been forced to flee their homes, their farms, their entire lives. They're displaced inside their own country with almost nowhere safe to go. Okay, but here's where the picture gets, well, a lot more complicating. This data comes from a group called ACLED, and it's really interesting. It shows that violence specifically targeting Christians for their faith actually only makes up about 5% of all the violence against civilians. So what does that mean? It means that while religious persecution is absolutely happening, it's happening inside a much, much bigger breakdown of security that's affecting, well, pretty much everyone. So all this data really points to 2 very different competing stories for what's actually causing all this bloodshed. Is it a holy war, or is it something else entirely? And this slide right here gets to the absolute heart of the debate. On one side, you have the religious conquest narrative. The argument here is simple. Extremist groups like Boko Haram are waging a targeted war to wipe out Christianity. But on the other side, you have the complex security crisis narrative. This one says, hey, hold on. The real drivers are things like climate change, which pushes farmers and herders into bloody conflicts over land and water, and just a total collapse of law and order that puts everybody at risk, not just Christians. So you've got this incredibly complicated local conflict. Now let's talk about how it suddenly blew up on the world stage and turned into a major diplomatic fight between Nigeria and the United States. So in November of 2025, former U.S. President Donald Trump posted a series of pretty shocking statements online. He didn't just condemn the violence, he threatened to send in the U.S. military, and he used some incredibly aggressive language to do it. Well, Nigeria's response? It was immediate, and it was firm. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu pushed back hard. He basically said that religious freedom is a core part of Nigeria's constitution and that his government is committed to protecting everyone. And Trump's words weren't just talk, There were actual moves being made.
His administration officially labeled Nigeria a country of particular concern, which is a really serious step in diplomacy. He threatened to cut off all U.S. aid, and he even claimed he told the Pentagon to start drawing up plans for potential action. So, where does that leave us? You've got this horrific massacre, these mind-boggling statistics, and two completely different stories about why it's all happening. The truth is, there's no simple answer here. It's messy. And this next point, this is probably the single most important piece of the puzzle, and it's one that completely flips that simple story on its head. Most analysts who study this agree. In northern Nigeria, where most of these attacks happen, the majority of people killed by these same armed groups are, in fact, Muslims. So, what we're really looking at here is a perfect storm. Is it a story of targeted religious extremism? Yes, absolutely, just like that first narrative says. But is it also a story about conflict over things like land and water, all happening inside a massive national security crisis? Yes, that's also true, just like the second narrative argues. The reality is, neither story is wrong, they're just incomplete by themselves. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. When a crisis is this complex, with so many different causes all tangled up together, the story that gets told to the rest of the world has enormous power. So we have to ask ourselves, which version of the story wins out? And what are the real-world consequences of the narrative we choose to believe?